They say that age is just a number, but when you're 78 years old, that number becomes a cage that everyone else builds around you. My name is Deborah Ward, though most folks call me Debbie, and I'm about to tell you a story that will make you question everything you think you know about getting older in this world. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. You see, there comes a time in every woman's life when the people around her stop seeing her as capable, as intelligent, as someone worth listening to. Instead, they start seeing her as fragile, confused, someone who needs to be managed rather than respected. What they don't realize is that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is underestimate a woman who has lived long enough to understand exactly how the world works. For months now, my daughter-in-law has been telling our neighbors that I suffer from confusion, that I wander off without purpose, lost in my own mind like some tragic character from a television drama. She speaks about me in hushed tones at the grocery store, shaking her head with that practiced look of concern that makes other people nod sympathetically and offer their condolences for having to deal with such a burden. But here's what she doesn't know, what none of them know. Every single time I've walked out that front door, every moment they thought I was wandering aimlessly through our quiet neighborhood, I was actually heading somewhere very specific, somewhere that would change everything they thought they understood about old Debbie Ward. I wasn't lost at all. I was visiting my private banker. The morning light filters through my kitchen window the same way it has for the past 23 years, casting familiar shadows across the ceramic tiles that Harold and I picked out together when we first moved into this house. Harold's been gone for 6 years now, but his presence still lingers in every corner of this home we built together. The coffee maker gurgles to life at exactly 6:30, just like it did when he was here to share those quiet morning moments with me. I stand at the sink, watching Mrs. Patterson from next door tend to her rose garden, her movements deliberate and practiced. She's only 5 years younger than me, but somehow she's escaped the invisible label that seems to follow me everywhere I go these days. The label that whispers declining and confused and needs watching. Perhaps it's because she still has her husband to vouch for her competence, or maybe it's simply because she's learned to stay quietly in her garden instead of taking walks through the neighborhood like I do. The sound of a car door slamming interrupts my thoughts, and I know without looking that it's my son David arriving for our weekly breakfast. He's a good man, my David, but he's married to a woman who has very specific ideas about what it means to care for aging family members. Claire has been part of our family for 12 years now, and in all that time, she's never quite understood that caring for someone doesn't mean taking away their autonomy. David's key turns in the front door, followed immediately by Claire's voice echoing through the hallway. "Mom, we're here," she calls out, using that artificially bright tone that people reserve for small children and elderly relatives. I've grown to despise that tone. The way it strips away decades of experience and reduces me to someone who needs to be managed rather than respected. "I'm in the kitchen," I call back, setting down my coffee cup and smoothing my hands over the floral blouse I chose this morning. At 78, I still take pride in my appearance, still believe that how you present yourself to the world matters. My hair is styled the same way it has been for the past 15 years. Silver waves that frame a face that's earned every line and wrinkle through years of joy, sorrow, and everything in between. Claire enters the kitchen first, her perfectly manicured hands already reaching for the coffee pot without asking. She's 45 years old, works part-time at a dental office, and has the kind of nervous energy that makes her constantly busy with tasks that don't really need doing. This morning, she's wearing one of her pastel cardigans over dark jeans, her blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail that makes her look younger than her years. "How are you feeling today, Mom?" she asks. And there it is again, that tone that suggests she's expecting me to report some new symptom or confusion. "Did you sleep well?" Sometimes David worries that you might be having trouble sleeping, especially after what happened last week. What happened last week? She's referring to the afternoon, when I took a longer walk than usual, staying out for nearly 3 hours instead of my typical 1-hour stroll. When I returned home, I found Claire sitting on my front porch with her phone in her hand, clearly prepared to call the police if I hadn't appeared when I did. The relief on her face was genuine, but so was the frustration that followed. I slept perfectly fine, I tell her, measuring my words carefully. And I feel exactly the same as I did yesterday and the day before that. Sharp as a tack, as Harold used to say. David appears in the doorway, his 6-foot frame filling the space as he surveys the kitchen with the same protective gaze he's had since he was a teenager. He inherited his father's broad shoulders and steady presence, but he also inherited his generation's tendency to believe that age automatically equals decline. At 51, he's successful in his career as an electrical contractor, provides well for his family, and genuinely believes that monitoring my activities is an expression of love rather than control. "Morning, Mom," he says, leaning down to kiss my cheek. His embrace is warm and familiar, reminding me of all the times I held him when he was small and afraid of thunderstorms or worried about tests at school. "Claire was telling me you seemed a little tired yesterday when she stopped by." I hadn't been tired yesterday. I had been quietly frustrated after spending 45 minutes listening to Claire reorganize my spice cabinet according to her own system, explaining each decision as if I were a child learning to cook for the first time. But saying that would only confirm their growing suspicions that I'm becoming difficult and unrealistic about my own capabilities. "I'm fine," I repeat, the phrase that has become my standard response to their constant inquiries about my well-being. "Would you like some eggs? I was just about to start breakfast." Claire immediately springs into action, moving toward the refrigerator with that determined efficiency that makes it clear she doesn't trust me to handle the task alone. "Oh no, you sit down and relax, Mom. Let me take care of breakfast. You've done enough cooking over the years." The implication hangs in the air like smoke from a forgotten candle. I've done enough cooking, enough cleaning, enough managing of my own life. Now it's time to sit back and let younger, more capable hands take over. The fact that I prepared a complete Thanksgiving dinner for 14 people just 6 months ago seems to have disappeared from their collective memory, replaced by a narrative that focuses on the single moment when I forgot to turn off the stove. Burner after making tea. "I'm perfectly capable of making breakfast in my own kitchen," I say, but my words are already being overruled by Claire's bustling activity as she pulls eggs and bacon from the refrigerator. David settles himself at the kitchen table, the same table where I helped him with homework for 12 years, where we celebrated his graduation from high school, where Harold and I sat together every morning for 2 decades, sharing coffee and planning our days. "Mom, we're just trying to help." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Claire's been worried about some of the things the neighbors have mentioned. My stomach tightens at his words. The neighbors. Mrs. Patterson with her careful rose garden. Mr. and Mrs. Chen, who moved in 3 years ago and always wave politely when I pass their house. The young couple at the end of the street with their twin toddlers who sometimes escape their yard and run toward the road. What exactly have they been saying about me? What kind of things? I ask, though I'm not sure. I want to hear the answer. Claire turns from the stove, her expression carefully composed in that way that suggests she's rehearsed this conversation. "Well, Mrs. Patterson mentioned that she's noticed you walking at odd hours sometimes. And the Hendersons said they saw you heading toward downtown last Tuesday afternoon, which seemed unusual since you don't usually go that direction." Last Tuesday afternoon. I remember that walk perfectly. I had taken the longer route to downtown because I had an appointment with Mr. Garrison at First National Bank, the same bank where Harold and I had maintained our accounts for over 30 years. It was an important meeting, one that required privacy and careful planning. But I couldn't explain that without revealing information I wasn't ready to share. There's nothing unusual about taking different routes for my walks, I say carefully. I've been walking these streets for over 20 years. I think I know my way around. Of course you do, David says quickly, but his tone carries that patronizing edge that suggests he's humoring me rather than agreeing with me. It's just that sometimes, as we get older, we might not realize when we're doing things that seem out of character. The neighbors care about you, Mom. They're not trying to gossip, they're just concerned. Concerned. That word has become the weapon of choice for people who want to control someone else's life while maintaining the moral high ground. They're not interfering, they're concerned. They're not limiting my freedom. They're keeping me safe. They're not treating me like a child. They're being responsible family members. The bacon sizzles in the pan as Claire continues her monologue about neighborhood observations and family responsibilities. David and I have been talking, and we think it might be helpful if you let us know when you're planning to take longer walks. Not because we don't trust you, but because it would give us peace of mind. Maybe you could even carry one of those emergency alert devices, just in case. An emergency alert device. An electronic leash disguised as safety equipment. I can picture it already, a plastic pendant hanging around my neck like some sort of scarlet letter announcing to the world that I'm no longer capable of managing my own comings and goings. I don't need an emergency alert device, I say firmly. I need my family to trust that I haven't suddenly become incompetent overnight. The kitchen falls silent except for the sound of eggs cooking and the distant hum of the refrigerator. David and Claire exchange one of those meaningful looks that married couples perfect over the years, the kind of wordless communication that excludes everyone else in the room. In this case, it's a look that says they've discussed this situation extensively and have reached conclusions about my mental state that they believe I'm not capable of understanding. Mom, David says gently, no one thinks you're incompetent. But sometimes people don't realize when they're starting to have small episodes of confusion. It's completely normal at your age. The important thing is being proactive about safety. Small episodes of confusion. Normal at my age. The phrases stack up like building blocks in a wall that's being constructed around me, brick by brick, conversation by conversation. Soon that wall will be high enough to justify any restrictions they want to place on my life. Any decisions they want to make on my behalf. Claire serves breakfast with the kind of careful attention usually reserved for invalids, making sure my plate isn't too hot, checking that I have everything I need within easy reach. She settles into her chair across from me, her expression bright with the satisfaction of someone who believes they're handling a difficult situation with grace and patience. Mrs. Patterson also mentioned that she's happy to keep an eye on things. When you're out, Claire continues, cutting her eggs into precise bites. She said she could watch from her window and make sure you get home safely. Isn't that sweet of her? Sweet. The word tastes bitter in my mouth as I realize that my daily walks, the one activity that still makes me feel independent and capable, have become a community surveillance project. Mrs. Patterson stationed at her window like a sentry, timing my departures and returns, probably keeping notes about my routes and destinations to report back to my well-meaning family. I don't need Mrs. Patterson to watch me, I say, but the words sound weaker than I intended, more defensive than authoritative. Of course not. David agrees in that tone that means the opposite of what he's saying. But it's nice to know that people care. Right? It's like having an extended family looking out for you. An extended family of wardens, more like. I take a bite of eggs that suddenly taste like cardboard, wondering when exactly I crossed the invisible line from independent adult to someone who requires constant monitoring. Was it when I turned 75? When Harold died and I became a widow living alone? Or was it more gradual, a slow erosion of respect that happened so gradually I didn't notice until the walls were already closing in? The conversation shifts to other topics as we finish breakfast, but the underlying current remains the same. David tells me about a new project at work, but prefaces it with concerns about whether I'm following current events enough to understand what he's talking about. Claire mentions their upcoming vacation plans, then immediately assures me that they've arranged for someone to check on me while they're gone, as if I might forget to eat or accidentally set the house on fire without their supervision. Every interaction is filtered through their perception of my declining capabilities. Every response I give is analyzed for signs of confusion or inappropriate reactions. I find myself second-guessing my own words, wondering if a perfectly normal comment might be interpreted as evidence that I'm losing touch with reality. After they leave, promising to call later to make sure I'm okay, I stand at my kitchen window watching Claire's car disappear down the street. The morning light has shifted, casting different shadows across the tiles, and I realize that something fundamental has changed in my life without my permission or participation. I'm being managed now, instead of respected. Monitored instead of trusted. The transition happened so gradually that I almost missed it, like the way seasons change from one day to the next until suddenly you realize that summer has become autumn and there's no going back. But here's what David and Claire and Mrs. Patterson and all the concerned neighbors don't understand about Deborah Ward. I didn't survive 78 years on this planet, raise a successful son, build a marriage that lasted 4 decades, and manage a household through good times and bad times just to surrender my autonomy without a fight. They think my walks are random wandering, signs of confusion and decline. They have no idea that every step I take is purposeful. Every route I choose is carefully planned, and every destination I reach is part of a larger strategy that would surprise them more than they could possibly imagine. Tomorrow, I'll take another walk. Mrs. Patterson will watch from her window, probably noting the time I leave and the direction I choose. Claire will call in the evening to make sure I made it home safely. David will ask leading questions designed to assess my mental clarity. And none of them will suspect that I'm not wandering aimlessly through our quiet neighborhood at all. I'm executing a plan that's been months in the making, one that will change everything they think they know about what it means to grow older with dignity and purpose. The phone rings, interrupting my thoughts, and I already know it's Claire calling to make sure I'm okay after their visit. As I reach for the receiver, I catch my reflection in the kitchen window, and for just a moment, I see not the confused elderly woman that everyone else seems to perceive, but the sharp, determined person I've always been. "Hello, Claire," I say, answering before she can even identify herself. "Oh, good, you're there," she says, and I can hear the relief in her voice. "I just wanted to make sure you were feeling all right after our conversation this morning. Sometimes these talks can be overwhelming." Overwhelming. Another word designed to diminish my capacity to handle my own life's complexities. "I'm fine," I tell her, looking out at the street where I'll walk again tomorrow, following a path that leads to discoveries that would astonish her. I'm doing exactly what I need to do. The following Tuesday arrives with the kind of crisp autumn air that makes everything seem more vivid, more purposeful. I dress carefully this morning, choosing my navy blue wool coat and comfortable walking shoes, the same ones I've worn for these particular outings for the past 3 months. There's something almost ritualistic about the preparation now, like putting on armor before heading into battle. From my bedroom window, I can see Mrs. Patterson already stationed at her kitchen sink, the perfect vantage point for monitoring my comings and goings. She's developed quite a routine around my schedule, appearing at her window with suspicious regularity whenever I prepare to leave the house. I wonder if she keeps a notebook, documenting the times and directions of my departures like some amateur detective gathering evidence for a case she doesn't fully understand. The irony isn't lost on me that a woman who spent 45 years as an elementary school teacher, managing classrooms full of energetic children and navigating complex administrative systems, is now considered too confused to take a walk without supervision. Mrs. Patterson herself is 73, just 5 years younger than me. Yet somehow she's escaped the invisible net of concern that seems to have entangled my daily life. I check my purse one final time, ensuring that all the necessary documents are secured in the inner zippered compartment. The manila envelope is thin, but contains papers that represent months of careful planning and consideration. Mr. Garrison specifically requested that I bring the original copies today, explaining that the bank's legal department requires physical documentation for the type of arrangements we've been discussing. The walk downtown takes exactly 28 minutes when I maintain my usual pace, a timing I've perfected through repetition over the past several months. The route takes me through the older section of our neighborhood, past houses that have stood since the 1940s, their front porches and mature oak trees creating a canopy of familiarity that should comfort me. Instead, I find myself hyper-aware of every window, every potential observer who might report back to my family about my suspicious wandering. Mrs. Chen waves from her garden as I pass, her smile genuine but tinged with that careful concern that has become so familiar. "Beautiful day for a walk, Mrs. Ward," she calls out, her voice carrying just a hint of the question that everyone seems to be asking these days. "Where are you going? Are you sure you know the way back? Should someone be with you?" "Indeed it is," I respond, maintaining the pleasant demeanor that has served me well through decades of social interactions. There's no point in letting my frustration show, no benefit to revealing how their gentle surveillance makes me feel like a flight risk rather than a neighbor. The younger couple at the end of Maple Street, the Hendersons, are loading their twin toddlers into their car as I approach. Jessica Henderson looks up from strapping her daughter into her car seat, offering the kind of bright smile that young mothers perfect for interactions with elderly neighbors. "Mrs. Ward, how nice to see you out and about. Are you heading somewhere special today?" The question hangs in the air with deceptive casualness, but I recognize the underlying current of concern. Claire has clearly been busy, spreading her narrative about my confused wandering to anyone who will listen. The idea that a 78-year-old woman might have legitimate business to conduct, places to go that don't require explanation or supervision, seems to have become unthinkable. "Just enjoying this lovely weather," I reply, which is technically true, even if it's not the complete truth. "Those girls of yours are growing so fast." Jessica beams with the pride that comes naturally to parents of healthy children. But even as she launches into a brief update about potty training and preschool applications, I can see her cataloging details about my appearance, my demeanor, my apparent destination. She'll probably mention this encounter to her husband tonight, adding it to the neighborhood's growing file of observations about the elderly widow who seems to be developing concerning habits. As I continue down the street, leaving the residential area behind and moving toward the commercial district, I feel the weight of all those watching eyes, all those well-intentioned concerns that have transformed my simple walks into community events. The freedom I once took for granted, the ability to move through the world without explanation or justification, has been gradually eroded by people who believe they're protecting me from myself. The downtown area bustles with the kind of midweek activity that I remember from my younger days when Harold and I would run errands together, making stops at the hardware store, the pharmacy, the bank. Back then, no one questioned our presence or wondered if we were lost. We were simply adults conducting the business of our lives, moving through the world with the confidence that comes from being seen as competent and autonomous. First National Bank sits on the corner of Main and 3rd Street, its red brick facade and traditional columns projecting the kind of institutional stability that drew Harold and me here more than 30 years ago. We opened our first joint checking account in this building when David was just a baby, sitting across from a young loan officer who helped us understand the mortgage process for our first house purchase. The lobby maintains the same formal atmosphere, I remember, with its polished marble floors and dark wood furniture that suggests serious financial conversations and important decisions. But now, as I approach the reception desk, I notice how the young woman behind the counter looks at me with that particular expression of patient attention reserved for elderly customers who might need extra help understanding basic banking procedures. "Good morning," I say clearly, presenting my identification along with the appointment card that Mr. Garrison provided during our last meeting. I have an 11 o'clock appointment with Mr. Garrison. The receptionist, whose nameplate identifies her as Amanda, examines my identification with the thoroughness of someone who has been trained to watch for signs of confusion or potential fraud among older clients. Of course, Mrs. Ward. Let me call Mr. Garrison's office and let him know you're here. Please have a seat, and he'll be with you shortly. I settle into one of the leather chairs in the waiting area, observing the other customers who move through. The lobby with the brisk efficiency of people whose financial competence is never questioned. A man in his 40s discusses investment options with a personal banker, his voice confident as he references market trends and portfolio diversification. A woman perhaps 10 years younger than me conducts business at the teller window. Her transaction processed quickly and without the extra scrutiny that seems to accompany my every interaction. Mrs. Ward? A familiar voice interrupts my observations, and I look up to see Mr. Garrison approaching with the kind of professional smile that has put nervous clients at ease for decades. Richard Garrison is perhaps 60 years old, with silver hair and the kind of measured demeanor that suggests extensive experience in handling sensitive financial matters. Over the past 3 months, he has treated me with the respect and attention that has become rare in other areas of my life. Mr. Garrison, good morning, I respond, rising from my chair with the dignity that I refuse to surrender despite everyone's expectations of decline. Please come back to my office, he says, gesturing toward the hallway that leads to the private banking offices. I have the documents we discussed prepared for your review. His office reflects the same traditional banking aesthetic as the lobby, with mahogany furniture and thick carpeting that muffles sound and creates an atmosphere of confidential conversation. The walls display his various professional certifications and community service awards, evidence of the kind of established career that commands respect in a small city like ours. I trust you brought the documents I requested? He asks, settling behind his desk as I take the chair across from him. I retrieve the manila envelope from my purse, placing it on his desk with the satisfaction of someone who has come prepared for important business. Everything you specified. The original property deed, Harold's life insurance documents, and the investment portfolio statements from our previous financial advisor. Mr. Garrison opens the envelope with the careful attention of a professional who understands that these papers represent more than just financial assets. They represent a lifetime of careful planning and hard-earned security. Harold and I spent decades building what we hoped would be a comfortable retirement and a meaningful legacy for our family. Excellent, he murmurs, reviewing each document with the thoroughness that this situation requires. The property appraisal came back exactly as we anticipated. Your home is worth considerably more than you originally estimated, Mrs. Ward. The downtown revitalization project has increased property values throughout your neighborhood quite substantially. The numbers he shows me are indeed higher than I expected, though not surprising given the changes I've observed in our area over the past few years. Young families moving in, older homes being renovated, new businesses opening along the main commercial strips. Harold and I chose our location well when we purchased the house 23 years ago, though we never imagined it would appreciate quite this dramatically. And the insurance settlement from Harold's policy has been earning interest in the money market account as we discussed. Mr. Garrison continues, spreading additional documents across his desk. Combined with your Social Security benefits and the pension from your teaching career, you have considerably more financial flexibility than most people in your situation realize. Most people in my situation. The phrase carries implications that extend beyond simple financial planning. He's referring to elderly widows, women who are often assumed to be financially naive or incapable of managing complex decisions about money and investments. The stereotype suggests that we need guidance from younger, presumably more competent family members who can protect us from making imprudent choices. Which brings us to the arrangements you want to make, Mr. Garrison says, his tone becoming more serious as he pulls out a different set of papers. I want to make absolutely certain that you understand the implications of what you're proposing. These are significant financial commitments that will substantially impact your personal assets. I lean forward slightly, meeting his gaze with the directness that has served me well in countless important conversations throughout my life. Mr. Garrison, I taught elementary school for 45 years. I managed a classroom, worked with parents, navigated administrative requirements, and helped shape young minds during some of the most crucial years of their development. I also managed our household finances for the entire duration of my marriage, including the periods when Harold's contracting business struggled during economic downturns. I understand exactly what I'm proposing and why. His expression shifts slightly, acknowledging the steel in my voice that suggests he should abandon any inclination to treat me as a confused elderly woman who needs protection from her own decisions. Of course, Mrs. Ward, I simply want to ensure that we've covered all the considerations before we proceed. He spreads out the paperwork that will formalize the arrangements we've been discussing over the past several months. The legal language is complex, but the basic structure is straightforward enough. I am establishing a trust that will allow me to transfer significant assets to my family while maintaining control over the timing and conditions of that transfer. The mortgage payoff for your son's home will be handled through the trust, Mr. So. Garrison explains, pointing to the relevant sections of the documents. The payment will appear to come from an anonymous benefactor, exactly as you requested. There will be no way for David or Claire to trace the source back to you unless you choose to reveal it. This detail is crucial to my plan. David and Claire's house has been a source of financial stress for them for the past 2 years, ever since David's business experienced a significant downturn and they were forced to refinance at a higher interest rate. Their monthly mortgage payments now consume nearly 40% of their income, leaving little room for emergencies or the kind of family activities they enjoyed when their financial situation was more stable. They've never asked me for help, would never even consider it given their perception of elderly widows as people who need financial assistance rather than people capable of providing it. Their pride, combined with their assumptions about my limited resources, has created a situation where they struggle unnecessarily while I watch from a distance, unable to offer help without damaging their dignity. The education fund for your grandchildren will be structured similarly, Mr. Garrison continues. Anonymous donations to established college savings accounts, distributed over time to avoid triggering gift tax implications. Emily and Michael will have their college expenses covered without anyone in the family understanding the source of their good fortune. Emily is 16 now, a bright girl who talks about studying engineering like her grandfather did. Michael is 14, already showing interest in music and art that suggests expensive equipment and lessons in his future. Both children represent the kind of potential that deserves support, the kind of dreams that shouldn't be limited by their parents' current financial constraints. And the emergency fund will remain under your direct control, Mr. Garrison adds, indicating another section of the paperwork. If David and Claire encounter unexpected medical expenses, home repairs, or other significant costs, you'll be able to provide assistance through the trust structure without revealing your involvement. The beauty of this arrangement lies in its invisibility. My family will receive the financial support they need to thrive, but their pride and independence will remain intact. They'll never know that the confused, wandering elderly woman they're so concerned about is actually the source of their improved circumstances. There is one consideration we haven't fully addressed, Mr. Garrison says, his tone becoming more cautious. This level of asset transfer will significantly reduce your personal net worth. While you'll retain enough resources to maintain your current lifestyle comfortably, you won't have the same financial cushion if you encounter major expenses related to healthcare or long-term care. This is the risk that keeps me awake some nights, the calculation that requires the most careful consideration. By choosing to support my family now, while I'm healthy and independent, I'm gambling that I won't need expensive medical interventions or assisted living arrangements in the future. It's a bet on my own continued good health and mental clarity, a wager that assumes I'll maintain control over my own circumstances for the foreseeable future. I've considered that very carefully, I tell him. I would rather spend my remaining years knowing that David and Claire and the grandchildren are financially secure than hoard resources for medical situations that might never arise. If I do need expensive care eventually, we'll address that situation when it comes. Mr. Garrison nods, his expression suggesting that he's worked with enough elderly clients to understand the complexity of these decisions. Very well. If you're certain about proceeding, we can finalize the paperwork today. The trust will be established within the next week, and the first transfers can begin shortly after that. I take the pen he offers and begin signing the documents that will transform my theoretical plan into legal reality. Each signature represents months of careful thought, years of observing my family's struggles, and a lifetime of understanding that sometimes the most generous acts require the most elaborate secrecy. As I work through the paperwork, Mr. Garrison explains the timeline for implementation. The mortgage payoff will be processed first, appearing as a payment from an estate settlement that includes several anonymous beneficiaries. David and Claire will receive notification from their mortgage company that their loan has been satisfied, along with documentation that appears completely legitimate and untraceable. The mortgage payoff will eliminate their largest monthly expense, freeing up money for the kind of family experiences they've been denying themselves. Maybe they'll finally take that vacation to the Grand Canyon that Claire mentioned wanting to take for the past 3 years. Perhaps David will be able to invest in the new equipment his business needs to become more competitive. The education funds will begin appearing as scholarship awards and grant money, Mr. Garrison continues. Small amounts initially, then larger distributions as the children approach college age. Everything will appear to come from legitimate educational foundations and anonymous donor programs. Emily will be able to pursue her engineering dreams without the burden of student loans that might limit her career choices after graduation. Michael will have access to the kind of musical education and equipment that could nurture his artistic talents into something professionally viable. Both children will enter adulthood with opportunities that their parents' current financial situation couldn't provide. The final signatures complete the process, and Mr. Garrison organizes the documents with the efficiency of someone who has handled countless similar transactions. Mrs. Ward, I want you to know that in 30 years of banking, I've rarely seen such thoughtful estate planning. Your family is fortunate to have someone who understands the value of strategic generosity. Strategic generosity. The phrase captures exactly what I've been trying to achieve through months of planning and preparation. Not the impulsive charity that might embarrass its recipients, but carefully structured assistance that preserves dignity while providing genuine support. As I prepare to leave his office, Mr. Garrison hands me a business card with his direct phone number. Please don't hesitate to contact me if you have any questions or concerns as we move forward with implementation. And Mrs. Ward, I hope you'll continue to feel comfortable conducting your business here, regardless of what others might think about your independence. His words carry a weight that suggests he understands more about my situation than he's explicitly acknowledged. Perhaps other elderly clients have shared similar stories about family members who mistake care for control, concern for condescension. Maybe he's witnessed the transformation of competent adults into presumed invalids simply because they've reached a certain chronological age. Thank you, Mr. Garrison. I'll be in touch as needed. The walk home takes the same 28 minutes as always, but today, the familiar route feels different, charged with the energy that comes from having set significant events in motion. By the time David and Claire realize what has happened, their mortgage will be paid off, their children's educations will be secured, and their emergency expenses will be covered. They'll search for explanations, investigate the source of their good fortune, but they'll never suspect that the confused, wandering elderly woman they're so worried about orchestrated the entire transformation. Mrs. Patterson is still stationed, At her kitchen window when I turn onto our street, her vigil as predictable as the sunrise. She waves with the kind of relief that suggests she's been genuinely concerned about my extended absence, probably calculating how long she should wait, before calling David to report that I hadn't returned from my mysterious wandering. "Mrs. Ward," she calls out as I approach my front walkway. "I was just thinking about you. Such a long walk today. I do hope you didn't get lost or confused about where you were going." Lost or confused. The words that have become the soundtrack to my daily life, the constant refrain that suggests every deviation from expected patterns must indicate cognitive decline rather than purposeful activity. Not at all, Mrs. Patterson. I knew exactly where I was going and exactly how to get back. Inside my house, I settle into Harold's old recliner with a cup of tea, surrounded by the familiar comforts of a home that I've maintained and managed for more than 2 decades. The documents from Mr. Garrison's office are safely stored in my desk drawer, tangible proof that today's mission was successful. The phone rings within minutes of my return, and I know without checking the caller ID that it's Claire conducting her routine wellness check. These calls have become as predictable as Mrs. Patterson's window vigil, scheduled to coincide with my return from longer walks, as if she's been coordinating with the neighborhood surveillance network. "Hi, Mom. I was just calling to see how your day is going," she says, though her tone suggests she already knows I've been out and is fishing for details about my destination and activities. "My day has been quite productive, thank you," I respond, which is completely truthful, even if it lacks the specificity she's hoping for. "Oh, that's nice. Did you get out for a walk today? The weather has been so beautiful." She knows I went. For a walk. Someone has already reported my departure and return, probably with commentary about the length of my absence and speculation about my mental state during the journey. Yes, I had a very nice walk. Fresh air is so important at my age. There's a pause that suggests Claire is debating whether to probe further, whether to ask directly about my destination, or continue with the indirect approach that maintains the pretense that she's simply making conversation rather than conducting an interrogation. "Well, I'm glad you're staying active. David and I were talking, and we thought it might be nice if I started joining you for some of your walks. Just for the company, you understand. It would give us a chance to spend more time together." Company. The word carries implications that extend far beyond simple social interaction. What she's really proposing is supervision disguised as companionship, monitoring disguised as family bonding. My walks would no longer be private journeys but chaperoned, expeditions, every destination subject to explanation and approval. "That's very thoughtful of you, Claire, but I enjoy my solitary walks. They give me time to think and remember, Harold. I'm sure you understand." "Of course," she says quickly, though her tone suggests that she doesn't understand at all, that she views my preference for independence as another sign of unrealistic thinking rather than a legitimate personal choice. The conversation continues for several more minutes, covering the safe topics that have become standard for our interactions. The weather, the neighbors, David's work, the grandchildren's school activities. Throughout, I can hear the underlying current of assessment, the careful attention to my responses that suggests every word is being evaluated for signs of confusion or inappropriate thinking. After we hang up, I sit in the quiet of my living room, surrounded by photographs that chronicle a lifetime of experiences and achievements. Harold and me on our wedding day, young and full of plans for the future we would build together. David's graduation pictures from high school and college. Photos of family vacations, holiday celebrations, ordinary moments that seemed unremarkable at the time, but now represent precious memories of when I was seen as a full participant in life rather than someone who needed constant monitoring. In just a few days, the first phase of my plan will be implemented. David and Claire will receive notification that their mortgage has been mysteriously paid off by an anonymous benefactor. They'll be shocked, confused, probably suspicious about the legitimacy of such unexpected good fortune. They'll investigate, ask questions, try to understand how such a thing could happen. And through it all, they'll continue to worry about the confused elderly woman who wanders around the neighborhood without clear purpose, never suspecting that she's the architect of their dramatically improved circumstances. They'll keep watching my comings and goings, keep questioning my mental clarity, keep treating me like someone who needs protection from her own decisions. The irony would be amusing if it weren't so frustrating. The same people who doubt my ability to walk around my own neighborhood without getting lost will be the beneficiaries of financial planning that requires sophisticated understanding of tax law, estate management, and investment strategy. The woman they think needs supervision for simple daily activities has just executed a complex, multi-phase plan that will change their lives in ways they can't begin to imagine. Tomorrow, Mrs. Patterson will resume her window vigil. The Hendersons will continue monitoring my routes and reporting unusual activities to my concerned family members. Claire will call to check on my well-being and subtly probe for signs of decline. David will listen to their reports and worry about his mother's growing confusion and potentially dangerous wandering. None of them will suspect that every step I take is deliberate, every destination carefully chosen, every apparent moment of aimless wandering actually part of a larger strategy that demonstrates exactly how sharp and purposeful a 78-year-old mind can be. As evening approaches and the autumn light begins to fade, I prepare for bed with the satisfaction that comes from having accomplished something significant. Tonight, I'll sleep well, knowing that the wheels I've set in motion will soon transform my family's financial reality in ways that preserve their dignity while providing the security they deserve. And tomorrow, I'll take another walk. The morning arrives with an unseasonable warmth that makes the October air feel like an unexpected gift. I stand at my kitchen counter, sipping coffee from the mug that Harold bought me during our trip to Yellowstone 15 years ago, watching the neighborhood come alive with its predictable rhythms. School buses collect children, commuters hurry toward their cars, and the retired residents like myself begin emerging for morning walks and garden work. Today marks exactly 1 week since my meeting with Mr. Garrison, and I feel a peculiar mixture of anticipation and anxiety as I wait for the first phase of my plan to unfold. According to his timeline, David and Claire should receive notification about their mortgage within the next few days. The anonymous payment will appear in their account like an unexpected miracle, challenging everything they think they understand about how the world works. The telephone interrupts my morning contemplation, and I'm surprised to see David's number on the caller ID. Our usual conversations happen in the evenings or weekends, not during his busy workday hours. Something urgent must have prompted this early call. "Mom, I'm sorry to bother you so early," he says, though his voice carries an excitement that contradicts the apology. "But something incredible has happened, and I wanted to share the news with you right away." My heart begins beating faster, though I maintain the carefully neutral tone that this moment requires. "What's happened, David?" "Our mortgage company called this morning. They said our loan has been completely paid off by an anonymous benefactor. Can you believe that? Someone paid off our entire mortgage without telling us who they are or why they did it." The words hang in the air between us, and I find myself holding my breath as I wait for his response to this information. This is the moment I've been planning for months, the beginning of the transformation that will change his family's financial reality while preserving their pride and independence. "That's extraordinary," I managed to say, injecting just the right amount of surprise into my voice. "Are you certain it's legitimate? It sounds almost too good to be true." That's exactly what Claire and I thought. We've been on the phone with the mortgage company for the past hour, asking every question we can think of. They assured us that the payment came through proper legal channels, with all the necessary documentation. Apparently, it's from some kind of estate settlement that included provisions for anonymous charitable giving. Estate settlement. Mr. Garrison's cover story is working exactly as planned, providing a plausible explanation that deflects curiosity while satisfying legal requirements. David and Claire will accept this windfall as an extraordinary stroke of luck, rather than searching for personal connections that might lead them to uncomfortable conclusions about my involvement. Have you told the children yet? I ask, genuinely curious about how Emily and Michael will process this news. Not yet. We're still trying to understand it ourselves. The mortgage company is sending us all the paperwork, but they've confirmed that our loan balance is zero. Zero, Mom. After 12 years of payments, we suddenly own our house free and clear. The relief in his voice is unmistakable, and I feel a deep satisfaction knowing that I've been able to provide this gift without damaging his sense of accomplishment or self-reliance. David worked hard to qualify for that original mortgage, made every payment on time even during the difficult periods when his business struggled. He deserves to feel proud of achieving home ownership, not diminished by accepting charity from family members. I'm so happy for you and Claire, I tell him, which is completely sincere even if he doesn't understand the full depth of my involvement in his good fortune. You've both worked so hard over the years. Maybe this is the universe's way of recognizing your efforts. Maybe it is, he agrees, though I can hear the lingering bewilderment in his voice. Claire keeps saying someone must have made a mistake, that we should expect a phone call tomorrow explaining that the money was sent to the wrong account. But the documentation looks completely official. Claire's skepticism is understandable given their family's history of financial struggles. When you've spent years carefully budgeting every expense, unexpected windfalls seem suspicious rather than celebratory. She'll probably spend the next several weeks waiting for the other shoe to drop, expecting someone to demand repayment of money that was never theirs to begin with. Well, if it's legitimate, perhaps you should simply accept it as an extraordinary blessing, I suggest carefully. Sometimes wonderful things happen without explanation. You're right, of course. We're going to meet with our lawyer this afternoon just to make sure we understand all the legal implications, but assuming everything checks out, we're suddenly in a completely different financial position. Different financial position. The phrase encompasses so much more than simple debt relief. Without the burden of mortgage payments, David and Claire will have nearly $1,000 in additional monthly income. They'll be able to afford family vacations, home improvements, emergency expenses that previously would have required difficult decisions about priorities and sacrifices. Emily will be able to participate in the robotics club at school without her parents worrying about the cost of materials and competition fees. Michael can pursue his interest in guitar lessons without the family agonizing over whether music education is a luxury they can afford. Both children will grow up in a household where financial stress doesn't dominate every major decision. I should let you get back to work, I tell David, though I'm reluctant to end this conversation that represents the first fruits of months of careful planning. But please keep me informed about how everything develops. Of course, Mom, and thank you for listening. I know this probably sounds crazy, but I needed to share the news with someone who would understand how much this means to our family. After we disconnect, I remain standing in my kitchen, absorbing the magnitude of what has just occurred. The first phase of my plan has succeeded beyond my most optimistic expectations. David and Claire are experiencing the relief and joy that I hope to provide without any suspicion about the true source of their good fortune. But even as I celebrate this success, I'm aware that my daily life continues to be constrained by the growing network of concern and surveillance that surrounds me. Mrs. Patterson maintains her window vigil with increasing dedication, probably encouraged by Claire's regular requests for updates about my activities. The neighbors have clearly been recruited into an informal monitoring system that tracks my movements with the intensity usually reserved for flight risks or potential criminals. The irony is almost overwhelming. The same week that I've anonymously provided my family with financial security that will transform their lives, everyone around me is becoming more convinced that I'm losing my grip on reality. The sophisticated estate planning and legal arrangements that made David's mortgage payoff possible are somehow invisible to people who worry that I might get lost walking around my own neighborhood. I decide to test the boundaries of their surveillance system by taking an unscheduled walk this afternoon, choosing a route that will definitely attract attention from the network of watchers who have appointed themselves as guardians of my safety. If I'm going to be monitored anyway, I might as well provide them with something interesting to observe and report. The route I choose leads toward the newer section of town, where young families have built large houses on small lots, creating subdivisions that feel artificially planned compared to the organic development of my neighborhood. It's a perfectly legitimate destination for an afternoon walk, but it's also sufficiently unusual to trigger the kind of concerned reports that will inevitably make their way back to David and Claire. Mrs. Patterson is indeed stationed at her window as I emerge from my house, and I can see her noting the time and direction of my departure with the diligence of a security guard logging activities in an incident report. She waves with exaggerated enthusiasm, probably hoping to engage me in conversation that might reveal my intended destination or mental state. "Beautiful afternoon for a walk, Mrs. Ward," she calls out, her voice carrying that particular tone of concern that has become so familiar. "Are you heading somewhere special today?" "Just enjoying the fresh air," I respond with the kind of pleasant vagueness that I know will frustrate her desire for specific information, while maintaining the appearance of normal social interaction. The walk toward the newer subdivision takes me past several houses where neighbors are working in their yards, each interaction providing another opportunity for observation and assessment. Mr. Rodriguez looks up from raking leaves to offer a friendly greeting, but I can see him watching my progress down the street with the kind of attention that suggests he's been briefed about my supposed tendency toward confusion and aimless wandering. Mrs. Thompson, who lives 3 houses down from David and Claire, emerges from her garage just as I pass her driveway. The timing seems too convenient to be coincidental, and I suspect she's been watching from her window, waiting for an opportunity to conduct her own wellness check. "Mrs. Ward, how lovely to see you out and about," she says, positioning herself between me and the sidewalk in a way that suggests she's prepared to engage in an extended conversation whether I want one or not. "I was just thinking about you yesterday when I saw David at the grocery store. Such a wonderful son you have, always so concerned about your well-being." Concerned about my well-being. The phrase has become a euphemism for the kind of monitoring that transforms independent adults into subjects of community oversight. David's conversations with neighbors about my condition have clearly established a narrative that positions me as someone who requires collective vigilance rather than individual respect. David is indeed a caring son. I agree, though I'm careful not to acknowledge the underlying implications of her comment. "I hope you and your family are doing well." "Oh, we're fine, thank you. But I do worry about you sometimes, especially when I see you walking alone for such long periods. Have you considered getting one of those medical alert devices? My sister has one, and it gives her children such peace of mind." Medical alert devices. The conversation has moved quickly from polite neighborly concern to specific recommendations for managing my apparent decline. Mrs. Thompson clearly feels authorized to offer advice about my personal safety, probably believing that she's providing a valuable service by reinforcing the family's concerns about my judgment and decision-making abilities. "I appreciate your concern, but I'm quite capable of managing my own safety," I tell her, maintaining the firm but polite tone that has served me well in countless difficult conversations over the years. "Of course you are," she responds in that patronizing way that means exactly the opposite of what the words suggest. "I just think it's important for people our age to be realistic about our limitations." Our age. Our limitations. She's 71 years old, just 7 years younger than me, but somehow she's positioned herself as the voice of practical wisdom, addressing someone who lacks the insight to recognize her own declining capabilities. The assumption that chronological age automatically equals diminished competence has become so pervasive that even people in similar life stages feel qualified to offer guidance about managing the aging process. I continue my walk toward the subdivision, leaving Mrs. Thompson behind with her unsolicited advice and her obvious intention to report this encounter to whoever has designated her as part of my informal monitoring team. The newer houses begin appearing as I reach the edge of the commercial district, their fresh landscaping and pristine driveways creating an atmosphere of suburban prosperity that contrasts sharply with the established character of my neighborhood. The subdivision itself represents everything that Harold and I chose to avoid when we selected our current home 23 years ago. Houses built too close together, yards that lack the mature trees and established gardens that give neighborhoods character, architectural styles that prioritize square footage over craftsmanship. But the families who live here seem happy enough, and their children play in yards that are safe and well-maintained even if they lack the natural beauty of older residential areas. I choose a circular route through the subdivision that will take approximately 45 minutes to complete, long enough to ensure that my absence is noted and reported by the network of watchers who have appointed themselves as guardians of my safety. The timing is deliberate, calculated to generate exactly the kind of concern that will prompt phone calls to David and Claire about my increasingly erratic behavior. As I walk past houses where young mothers push strollers and fathers teach children to ride bicycles, I think about the financial security that my anonymous gift has just provided to David's family. Emily and Michael will grow up in a household where money stress doesn't dominate every decision, where opportunities for enrichment and growth aren't automatically limited by budget constraints. The education funds that Mr. Garrison is establishing will begin flowing next month, appearing as scholarship opportunities and academic grants that will seem like recognition of the children's potential rather than charity from a concerned grandmother. Emily's interest in engineering will be supported by summer programs and advanced coursework that her parents previously couldn't afford. Michael's musical talents will be nurtured through private lessons and quality instruments that transform hobby-level interest into serious artistic development. Both children will enter adulthood with college educations paid for by seemingly external sources, allowing them to choose careers based on passion and aptitude rather than financial pressure. They'll never know that their educational opportunities were secured by the same grandmother whose mental clarity their parents increasingly question. The walk through the subdivision reveals nothing particularly interesting or meaningful, but that's not the point of this afternoon's journey. The purpose is to provide my watchers with something to observe and report, to feed the growing narrative about my confused wandering while I privately celebrate the success of sophisticated financial planning that none of them would believe me capable of executing. By the time I complete the circular route and head back toward my neighborhood, I estimate that I've been gone for nearly 2 hours, long enough to trigger genuine concern among the people who have appointed themselves as monitors of my activities. Mrs. Patterson will probably have noted the time of my departure and calculated how long I've been away. Mrs. Thompson will certainly report our conversation and her unsuccessful attempt to convince me to accept medical alert supervision. The phone calls to David and Claire will begin shortly after my return, each concerned neighbor adding their observations to the growing file of evidence that suggests I'm experiencing cognitive decline that requires more intensive family intervention. They'll share details about my route, my demeanor, my apparent lack of clear purpose during what they perceive as aimless wandering through unfamiliar territory. None of them will suspect that today's walk was a deliberate test of their surveillance system, a way of providing them with the kind of concerning behavior they seem determined to document, while I privately savor the knowledge that my real activities are far more purposeful and successful than they can imagine. As I turn onto my street, I can see Mrs. Patterson positioned at her window with the predictability of a lighthouse beacon. Her relief at my safe return is visible even from a distance, and she waves with the kind of enthusiasm that suggests she's been genuinely worried about my extended absence. "Mrs. Ward, there you are," she calls out as I approach my front walkway. I was starting to get concerned. That was quite a long walk for such a warm afternoon. Quite a long walk. The phrase carries implications about my judgment and decision-making abilities, suggesting that someone my age should have recognized that extended physical activity might be dangerous or inappropriate. The idea that a healthy 78-year-old woman might choose to walk for 2 hours because she enjoys the exercise and fresh air seems to have become unthinkable. It was a lovely afternoon for exploring, I respond, which is technically accurate even if it doesn't address her underlying concerns about my mental state and decision-making abilities. Well, I'm just glad you made it home safely. David called about an hour ago looking for you. I told him you were out for a walk, but I think he was hoping to catch you at home. David called looking for me. The timing suggests that news of my extended absence has already made its way through the neighborhood communication network, prompting him to check on my well-being during his busy workday. The fact that he called Mrs. Patterson rather than simply trying my home phone indicates that he's now actively using the neighbors as sources of information about my daily activities. I'll call him back shortly, I tell her, though I'm curious about whether his call was prompted by routine concern or specific reports about my afternoon's activities. Inside my house, I settle into Harold's chair with a cup of tea, reflecting on the strange parallel existence I'm now living. In one reality, I'm a confused elderly woman whose extended walks generate community concern and family intervention meetings. In another reality, I'm a sharp financial strategist who has just provided my family with life-changing economic security through sophisticated estate planning and anonymous charitable giving. The telephone rings before I can call David back, and his voice carries the kind of controlled worry that suggests he's been thinking about my situation for most of the afternoon. Mom, I tried calling earlier, but Mrs. Patterson said you were out for a walk. She seemed concerned about how long you'd been gone. Mrs. Patterson seemed concerned. The phrase confirms that my afternoon's experiment succeeded in generating exactly the kind of worried attention I anticipated. The network of neighborhood watchers has functioned as designed, documenting my activities and reporting them to my family with the kind of detail usually reserved for surveillance operations. I took a longer walk than usual, I acknowledge. The weather was so beautiful, and I wanted to explore some areas of town that I hadn't visited in a while. Where did you go exactly? He asks, and I can hear the underlying current of assessment in his question. He's not simply making conversation. He's gathering information that will help him evaluate my mental state and decision-making capabilities through the newer subdivision on the east side of town. I was curious about how that area has developed over the past few years. There's a pause that suggests David is processing this information and finding it somewhat concerning. The newer subdivision is several miles from my house, requiring a level of physical exertion and navigational awareness that apparently conflicts with his growing assumptions about my declining capabilities. That's quite a distance, Mom. Are you sure you didn't get tired or confused about the route home? Tired or confused? The questions reveal his fundamental assumptions about my current mental and physical state. The idea that I might have chosen a challenging route deliberately, for the sake of exercise and exploration, seems not to have occurred to him as a possibility. Not at all. I know this town very well, David. I've been living here for more than 20 years. Of course you do, he says quickly, though his tone suggests that he's humoring me rather than acknowledging my competence. It's just that Claire and I have been talking, and we're worried that you might be taking unnecessary risks with these long walks. What if you had fallen or gotten lost? No one would have known where to look for you. What if I had fallen or gotten lost? The hypothetical scenarios that justify increased surveillance and reduced independence. Every elderly person becomes a potential emergency waiting to happen. Every expression of autonomy becomes evidence of poor judgment that requires family intervention. David, I appreciate your concern, but I've been taking care of myself for 78 years. I think I can manage a walk around town without supervision. I know you can, Mom, but things change as we get older, sometimes in ways we don't immediately recognize. Claire and I think it would be a good idea if we arranged for someone to check on you more regularly, maybe even accompany you on some of your walks. Someone to check on me more regularly. Someone to accompany me on walks. The language of concern disguising the reality of increased monitoring and reduced freedom. What David is proposing sounds supportive and caring. But the practical effect would be to transform my independent daily activities into supervised excursions, subject to family approval. That won't be necessary, I tell him firmly. I value my independence, and I'm not ready to give it up based on hypothetical concerns about what might happen. But Mom, we're not asking you to give up your independence. We just want to make sure you're safe. Safe. The word that justifies every restriction, every limitation, every reduction in personal autonomy that families impose on elderly relatives. Safety becomes the ultimate priority that trumps dignity, competence, and individual choice. The goal of keeping someone safe eventually becomes more important than preserving their sense of self-worth and personal agency. The conversation continues for another 10 minutes, with David carefully presenting his case for increased oversight while I maintain my position that such measures are unnecessary and unwelcome. Neither of us is likely to change the other's mind, but the discussion establishes the battle lines for future conflicts about my right to self-determination. After we hang up, I sit in the quiet of my living room, surrounded by the accumulated memories of a lifetime spent making my own decisions and taking responsibility for my own choices. The photographs on the mantel show a woman who raised a child, maintained a career, managed a household, and navigated the complexities of adult life with competence and grace. That woman hasn't disappeared simply because she's reached her 78th birthday. She hasn't become confused or incapable overnight, but everyone around her seems determined to believe that age has transformed her into someone who needs protection from her own judgment, someone whose desire for independence represents dangerous delusion rather than legitimate personal preference. Tomorrow, David will probably call Claire to discuss their growing concerns about my behavior. They'll review the reports from neighbors about my extended walk and my apparent lack of appreciation for their reasonable safety suggestions. They'll develop strategies for increasing their oversight of my activities while maintaining the fiction that they're simply being caring family members rather than gradually assuming control over my life. And while they're having those conversations, the second phase of my financial plan will be moving forward according to Mr. Garrison's timeline. The education fund deposits will begin appearing in accounts established for Emily and Michael, providing opportunities that their parents never imagined possible. The emergency fund will be positioned to address unexpected expenses that might otherwise create financial stress for the family. All of this sophisticated financial management will remain invisible to people who worry that I might get lost walking around my own neighborhood. The same mental acuity that enabled me to design and implement complex estate planning apparently doesn't extend to simple navigation skills in their estimation. The disconnect between their perception and reality would be amusing if it weren't. So personally frustrating. I'm living a double life now, playing the role of the declining elderly woman during family interactions while privately executing plans that require sharp analytical thinking and careful attention to legal and financial details. As evening approaches and the autumn light begins to fade, I prepare for bed with the satisfaction of knowing that today brought both success and challenge. David's excitement about the mortgage payoff confirms that the first phase of my plan achieved exactly the results I hoped for. His growing concerns about my independence remind me that I'll need to navigate carefully to maintain the freedom necessary for completing the remaining phases of my strategy. Tomorrow will bring new opportunities to demonstrate that an elderly woman can be both generous and competent, both caring and independent. The balance between those qualities may be delicate, but it's not impossible to achieve. The people who doubt my capabilities are about to discover that they've significantly underestimated what 78 years of life experience can accomplish when applied with purpose and determination. The morning light carries a different quality today, sharper somehow, as if the world has shifted into a new configuration that demands closer attention. I stand at my kitchen window, watching the familiar ballet of suburban morning routines, but everything feels charged with anticipation. Today marks 3 weeks since David received news about his mortgage payoff, and according to Mr. Garrison's carefully orchestrated timeline, The education fund notifications should begin arriving any day now. My coffee tastes particularly rich this morning, perhaps because I'm savoring it while mentally reviewing the intricate web of financial arrangements that are about to reshape my family's future in ways they can't yet comprehend. The irony continues to amaze me that the same relatives who question my ability to navigate a simple walk around the neighborhood have been the unknowing beneficiaries of estate planning that would challenge professional financial advisors. The PA. Telephone shatters my morning contemplation with its sharp electronic insistence. The caller ID displays Emily's cell phone number, an unusual development since my granddaughter typically communicates through her parents rather than calling me directly. At 16, she inhabits that peculiar adolescent space where family interactions require careful navigation between independence and obligation. Grandma Debbie? Her voice carries an excitement that immediately captures my attention, the kind of breathless enthusiasm that accompanies life-changing news. You're not going to believe what just happened. I mean, this is absolutely incredible, and I had to call you right away because I knew you'd understand how amazing this is. Emily's words tumble over each other with the rapid-fire delivery of youth encountering something too wonderful to process calmly. I settle into Harold's chair, preparing to hear about whatever development has generated such overwhelming excitement in my normally composed granddaughter. Tell me what's happened, sweetheart, I encourage, though my heart is already beating faster as I anticipate hearing confirmation that the second phase of my plan has begun implementation. I got accepted into the Advanced Engineering Summer program at State University, she announces, her voice rising with each word as if she still can't quite believe the information herself. But that's not even the best part, Grandma. They're offering me a full scholarship that covers tuition, housing, materials, everything. Everything. Can you believe that? The Advanced Engineering Summer Program. I remember Emily mentioning this opportunity several months ago, explaining how participation could significantly enhance her college applications and provide hands-on experience with cutting-edge technology. At the time, her parents had gently discouraged her interest, explaining that the cost would strain their budget beyond reasonable limits. That's absolutely wonderful, Emily, I tell her, injecting genuine enthusiasm into my voice while carefully maintaining the surprised tone that this moment requires. You must have made quite an impression with your application materials. That's what's so crazy about this, Grandma. The scholarship isn't based on my application at all. It's something called the Anonymous Future Leaders Grant, and apparently they select students based on academic potential and leadership qualities, demonstrated in their school activities. I never even knew this scholarship existed until they called yesterday afternoon. Anonymous Future Leaders Grant. Mr. Garrison's creativity in developing plausible cover stories continues to impress me. The scholarship sounds legitimate enough to satisfy any investigation while providing Emily with opportunities that her parents' current financial situation couldn't support. Did they explain how they identified you as a candidate? I ask, genuinely curious about the mechanisms that Mr. Garrison has established to make these opportunities appear authentic and unsolicited. The program coordinator said they work with high school guidance counselors to identify students who show exceptional promise in STEM fields. Apparently, Mrs. Rodriguez submitted my name along with several other students from our school, though she never mentioned it to me. The whole thing feels like some kind of amazing dream. Mrs. Rodriguez, Emily's guidance counselor, has probably been contacted by representatives of the grant program who explained that anonymous donors want to support promising young students without seeking recognition or gratitude. The scholarship will appear to come from a legitimate educational foundation with no connection to our family, preserving Emily's sense that she's earned this opportunity through her own merit and potential. Have you told your parents yet? I inquire, though I suspect that David and Claire are still processing this unexpected development with the same mixture of excitement and bewilderment that accompanied their mortgage payoff. Dad's been on the phone all morning trying to verify that this is legitimate, Emily laughs. He keeps saying it sounds too good to be true, but the program coordinator sent us all kinds of official documentation. Mom is already talking about what kind of clothes I'll need for living in a college dormitory for 6 weeks. David's skepticism is entirely predictable, given their family's recent experience with inexplicable good fortune. First, their mortgage mysteriously disappears. Now their daughter receives an unsolicited scholarship opportunity that addresses exactly the kind of educational enhancement they've wanted to provide but couldn't afford. The coincidence must seem remarkable, though not remarkable enough to suggest family connections rather than extraordinary luck. Your parents must be so proud of you, I observe, which is completely sincere, even though Emily doesn't understand the full extent of my involvement in creating this opportunity. They are, but they're also kind of stunned. Dad keeps muttering about checking with lawyers and financial advisors to make sure we're not accidentally getting involved in some kind of scam. He's become really paranoid about unexpected good news since the mortgage thing happened. The mortgage thing. Emily's casual reference to her parents' financial windfall reveals how quickly extraordinary events can become normalized in family narratives. What seemed impossible just a few weeks ago has already been integrated into their understanding of their current circumstances, though questions about the source of their good fortune continue to puzzle David and Claire. Well, sometimes wonderful, things happen without complete explanations, I suggest carefully. Maybe your family is simply experiencing a period of good fortune that you should embrace rather than question too extensively. That's exactly what I think, Emily agrees, enthusiastically. I mean, why spend energy worrying about why good things are happening instead of just being grateful and making the most of the opportunities? But you know how Dad is about wanting to understand every detail of everything. I do indeed know how David approaches unexpected developments, carefully analyzing every angle and seeking logical explanations for circumstances that don't fit his previous understanding of how the world operates. His methodical nature served him well in building his contracting business, but it also makes him suspicious of good fortune that arrives without obvious causation or clear strings attached. The important thing is that you'll have this amazing experience, I tell Emily. 6 weeks at a state university program will give you insights into engineering that you can't get from high school coursework alone. I know, right? They have laboratories with equipment that most undergraduate students don't get to use until their junior or senior years. And the professors are all actively involved in research projects that could change how we think about renewable energy and sustainable construction. Emily's excitement about the technical aspects of the program confirms that this opportunity aligns perfectly with her genuine interests and career aspirations. The scholarship isn't just providing financial assistance, it's opening doors to educational experiences that could influence the entire trajectory of her professional development. We continue talking for another 15 minutes about program details, housing arrangements, and the summer schedule that will balance intensive coursework with hands-on laboratory experience. Throughout our conversation, I'm struck by Emily's maturity and focus. Her ability to articulate complex ideas about engineering concepts and career planning with the sophistication of someone much older than 16. This is exactly why I wanted to secure her educational future through anonymous financial support. Emily possesses the kind of intellectual curiosity and technical aptitude that deserves nurturing, regardless of her parents' current economic constraints. The scholarship will provide opportunities that could transform her from a bright high school student into a future leader in fields that desperately need more women with strong technical backgrounds. After we disconnect, I remain in Harold's chair, absorbing the satisfaction that comes from hearing confirmation that my carefully laid plans are producing exactly the results I hope to achieve. Emily's excitement and gratitude aren't directed toward me, which is precisely the point of anonymous giving. She believes she's earned this opportunity through her own merit, which preserves her dignity while providing the support she needs to reach her full potential. The morning progresses with its usual rhythms, but I find myself more aware than usual of the surveillance network that continues to monitor my activities with increasing intensity. Mrs. Patterson has apparently recruited additional neighbors into her informal watch system, and I notice people positioning themselves at windows and in gardens with suspicious regularity whenever I appear outside my house. Claire arrives unannounced around noon, her key turning in my front door with the confident familiarity of someone who has convinced herself that surprise visits are necessary for monitoring my well-being. She calls out a greeting as she enters, but her voice carries that artificial brightness that suggests she's prepared for difficult conversations about my recent behavior and decision-making capabilities. "Mom, I hope you don't mind me stopping by," she says, appearing in my kitchen, with the kind of determined energy that indicates she has specific agenda items to address. "I was in the neighborhood running errands, and I thought it would be nice to check in and see how you're doing." Checking in. The phrase has become synonymous with assessment and evaluation, a polite way of conducting wellness examinations disguised as social visits. Claire's timing is almost certainly not coincidental, probably coordinated with Mrs. Patterson's observations about my morning activities and general demeanor. "I'm doing very well, thank you," I respond, maintaining the pleasant tone that has become my standard defense against these increasingly frequent investigations into my mental state and daily functioning. "That's wonderful to hear," Claire says, settling herself at my kitchen table with the air of someone preparing for an extended conversation. "David and I have been talking a lot lately about how much our lives have changed since the mortgage situation resolved itself. It feels almost surreal, like we're living in some kind of parallel universe where impossible things just happen for no apparent reason." The mortgage situation, another casual reference to extraordinary financial developments that have become normalized through repetition and acceptance. Claire's tone suggests that she's still searching for explanations, still puzzled by the sequence of unlikely events that have transformed her family's economic reality. "Sometimes life surprises us in pleasant ways," I suggest, though I'm careful not to seem too knowledgeable about the mechanisms that might produce such surprises. "That's true, and we're certainly grateful for whatever cosmic forces aligned to make these things possible. But I have to admit, it's made us more conscious of other areas where we want to make sure we're being responsible and proactive. Other areas where they want to be responsible and proactive. The conversation is moving toward topics that I suspect will involve my personal independence and their growing concerns about my ability to manage my own daily activities without supervision or intervention." "What kind of areas?" I ask, though I'm fairly certain I know where this discussion is heading. Claire takes a deep breath, the kind of preparatory gesture that suggests she's rehearsed this conversation and wants to present her concerns in the most diplomatic way possible. "Well, David and I have been thinking about your safety and well-being, especially given some of the observations that neighbors have shared about your recent walking patterns." Walking patterns, the clinical language, transforms my afternoon strolls into behavioral symptoms that require analysis and potentially correction. What was once simply exercise and fresh air has become evidence of cognitive changes that justify family intervention. "I enjoy my walks, Claire. They keep me healthy and give me time to think about Harold and reflect on my life. I don't see anything concerning about maintaining an active lifestyle." "Of course not, and we're not suggesting that you stop walking. We just think it might be wise to implement some basic safety measures that would give everyone peace of mind." Safety measures that would give everyone peace of mind. The language of compromise disguising the reality of restriction and control. Claire is about to propose solutions to problems that exist primarily in other people's imaginations rather than in my actual daily experience. "What kind of safety measures?" I inquire, though I'm prepared to resist whatever limitations they're planning to suggest. "Well, we've researched some of those personal emergency response systems, the kind that connect you to a monitoring service if you ever need help. They're really quite sophisticated now, with GPS tracking and two-way communication capabilities." GPS tracking. The conversation has moved quickly from personal emergency response to active surveillance, from safety equipment to monitoring devices that would allow my family to track my location in real time. What Claire is proposing would effectively eliminate any privacy or independence in my daily movements. I don't need GPS tracking, Claire. I've been navigating this town successfully for more than 20 years. We know you have, Mom, but technology has advanced so much, and these systems are designed to provide backup support, not to replace your own judgment. Think of it as insurance, something you hope never to need but that provides security just in case. Insurance. Backup support. The euphemisms continue to disguise the fundamental reality that what she's proposing would transform me from an independent adult into a monitored subject whose movements are continuously observed and recorded by people who have decided that my age automatically disqualifies me from making my own decisions about personal safety. I appreciate your concern, but I'm not ready to accept that level of monitoring. I value my privacy and independence. Claire's expression shifts slightly, revealing frustration that she's trying to keep hidden beneath a veneer of patient understanding. Mom, we're not trying to take away your independence. We're trying to preserve it by making sure you have support systems in place that allow you to continue living safely in your own home. Support systems that allow me to continue living safely in my own home. The implication is clear that without accepting these monitoring arrangements, my ability to remain independent will be questioned and potentially restricted through other means. What Claire is presenting as a helpful suggestion is actually an ultimatum disguised as a caring recommendation. What happens if I decline these support systems? I ask directly, preferring to understand the consequences rather than continuing to navigate around them diplomatically. Claire hesitates, clearly uncomfortable with stating the logical conclusion of her argument. Well, David and I would have to consider other options that might provide the level of oversight that we think is necessary for your safety. Other options that might provide oversight. The threat is delivered gently, but it's still a threat. If I refuse to accept voluntary monitoring through personal emergency devices, my family will consider involuntary alternatives that could include anything from hiring caregivers to exploring assisted living arrangements. I see, I respond, absorbing the full implications of what she's proposing. So my choice is between accepting electronic surveillance or having my living situation changed without my consent. That's not how we think about it, Mom. We think about it as making sure you have the support you need to continue living the life you want to live. The support I need to continue living the life I want to live. The circular logic is almost beautiful in its complexity. In order to preserve my independence, I must surrender my independence. In order to maintain my privacy, I must accept continuous monitoring. In order to keep my freedom, I must submit to restrictions that eliminate that freedom. I need some time to think about this, I tell her, though I already know that my answer will be a firm rejection of any surveillance arrangements regardless of the consequences they might impose. Of course, take all the time you need. But David and I hope you'll recognize that we're only suggesting these things because we love you and want what's best for your well-being. Because they love me and want what's best for my well-being. The ultimate justification for any restriction, any limitation, any reduction in personal autonomy. Love becomes the weapon used to eliminate the independence of people whose age has made them vulnerable to well-intentioned control by family members, who believe they know better than the elderly person herself what constitutes appropriate self-care. After Claire leaves, promising to call later to continue our conversation about safety measures and support systems, I sit in my kitchen contemplating the strange parallel reality that has become my daily existence. This morning, I celebrated Emily's scholarship success, knowing that I'm the anonymous benefactor who made that opportunity possible through sophisticated financial planning. This afternoon, I'm being threatened with electronic monitoring by people who doubt my ability to walk around my own neighborhood without getting lost. The disconnect between these two realities would be laughable if it weren't so personally threatening. The same mental acuity that enabled me to design and implement complex charitable giving arrangements apparently doesn't extend to basic navigation skills in my family's estimation. the woman who secretly orchestrated their mortgage payoff, and her granddaughter's educational funding is simultaneously considered too confused to be trusted with her own personal safety. I decide to take another unscheduled walk this afternoon, partly to enjoy the crisp autumn air, and partly to test the boundaries of their surveillance system one more time before they succeed in implementing formal monitoring arrangements. If I'm going to lose my freedom of movement, I want to exercise it fully while I still can. The route I choose leads toward the downtown business district, where I have legitimate errands to run at the pharmacy and the hardware store. But I also plan to extend the journey with a detour through the park that will add approximately an hour to what should be a simple trip, providing my watchers with exactly the kind of concerning behavior they seem determined to document. Mrs. Patterson is indeed positioned at her window as I emerge from my house, and I can see her immediately reaching for her phone, probably to alert Claire about my departure and the direction I'm traveling. The neighborhood surveillance network has become remarkably efficient, with multiple observation points and rapid communication systems that would be impressive if they weren't so personally intrusive. The walk downtown takes me past several houses where neighbors are strategically positioned to observe my progress. Mr. Chen looks up from washing his car to offer a friendly wave, but his attention to my pace and apparent destination suggests that his outdoor activities are timed to coincide with my movements. Mrs. Thompson emerges from her house to collect mail just as I pass her driveway, creating another opportunity for assessment and evaluation. "Beautiful day for a walk, Mrs. Ward," she calls out with that familiar tone of concern disguised as casual conversation. "Are you heading somewhere specific today?" "Just running some errands downtown," I respond truthfully, though I don't mention the park detour that will transform a simple shopping trip into the kind of extended absence that generates worried phone calls to my family. The pharmacy visit proceeds normally, with the young pharmacist treating me with professional courtesy as I collect my prescription medications and purchase some basic supplies. But I notice how he watches me navigate the store aisles, probably assessing my mental clarity and physical stability with the kind of attention that suggests he's been briefed about elderly customers who might be experiencing cognitive decline. The hardware store requires more complex problem-solving as I search for the specific type of weather stripping that will repair the gap around my front door. The process involves measuring, comparing options, and discussing installation techniques with the sales clerk. All activities that require the kind of analytical thinking and practical knowledge that my family apparently believes I no longer possess. After completing my legitimate errands, I implement the detour portion of my plan, heading toward Riverside Park, where I can extend my walk by following the trail system that winds through mature oak and maple trees along the creek. The park is nearly empty on this weekday afternoon, providing the kind of peaceful solitude that has become increasingly rare in my daily life. The trail system allows for various route options, and I choose the longer loop that will add approximately 90 minutes to my total absence from home. The timing is calculated to generate exactly the kind of concern that will support Claire's argument for implementing electronic monitoring systems. As I walk along the creek, listening to the gentle sound of water moving over rocks and fallen leaves, I think about the financial arrangements that are continuing to unfold according to Mr. Garrison's carefully orchestrated timeline. Emily's scholarship represents just the beginning of educational opportunities that will be available to both grandchildren over the next several years. Michael's music education fund will begin providing opportunities next month, appearing as awards from arts organizations and cultural foundations that recognize young people with exceptional creative potential. He'll have access to private lessons, quality instruments, and summer programs that could transform his casual interest in music into serious artistic development. Both children will grow up in a household where educational opportunities aren't limited by financial constraints, where their parents can say yes to enrichment activities and advanced programs without agonizing over budget implications. They'll never know that their expanded opportunities were secured by the same grandmother, whose mental clarity their parents increasingly question. The irony of my situation becomes more profound with each passing day. While I'm secretly providing my family with financial security, and educational opportunities that will change their lives, they're simultaneously working to restrict my personal freedom based on their assumptions about my declining capabilities. By the time I complete the park loop and head back toward home, I've been gone for nearly 3 hours, long enough to ensure that my absence has been noted and reported through the neighborhood communication network. Mrs. Patterson will probably have called Claire twice. Mr. Chen will have noted the time of my departure and reported my apparent destination, and various other neighbors will have contributed their observations to the growing file of evidence about my increasingly concerning behavior. The walk home takes me through the same residential streets where I've been walking for more than 20 years, past houses where I've watched children grow up, gardens that I've seen evolve through changing seasons, neighbors who have become part of the extended community that defines this area of town. Every step of the route is familiar, every turn automatic, yet my family has convinced themselves that I might get lost or confused navigating these well-known pathways. As I turn onto my street, I can see Mrs. Patterson stationed at her window with an expression of relief that suggests she's been genuinely worried about my extended absence. Her immediate reach for her phone confirms that she's been serving as the primary communication hub for updates about my activities and safe return. "Mrs. Ward, there you are," she calls out as I approach my front walkway. I was starting to get quite concerned. That was a very long time to be away, especially for someone who was just running errands downtown. A very long time to be away. The implication is that someone my age should recognize appropriate limits for physical activity and time spent away from home, that extended excursions represent poor judgment rather than personal choice about how to spend my afternoon. I decided to extend my walk through the park, I explain, which is completely accurate even if it doesn't address her underlying concerns about my decision-making abilities and safety awareness. "Well, I'm just glad you made it home safely. David called looking for you about an hour ago, and I had to tell him that you'd been gone for quite a while. He seemed quite worried." David called looking for me. The timing confirms that the neighborhood surveillance system is functioning exactly as designed, with observers reporting my activities and family members responding to concerning developments with increased oversight and evaluation. Inside my house, I settle into Harold's chair with a cup of tea, reviewing the events of an afternoon that successfully provided my watchers with exactly the kind of behavior they seem determined to document while allowing me to enjoy several hours of peaceful solitude in beautiful autumn weather. The telephone rings within minutes of my return, and David's voice carries the controlled worry that has become familiar during these conversations about my daily activities and apparent lack of awareness about appropriate safety precautions. "Mom, Mrs. Patterson said you were gone for over 3 hours today. She was really concerned about you." Mrs. Patterson was really concerned about me. The phrase confirms that my afternoon's experiment succeeded in generating the kind of worried attention that will support the family's argument for implementing formal monitoring arrangements. "I had errands to run and decided to take a longer walk through the park," I tell him, maintaining the matter-of-fact tone that has become my standard response to these inquiries about my activities and destinations. "The park? Mom, that's a significant detour from downtown. Were you feeling confused about the route home?" Confused about the route home. The question reveals his fundamental assumptions about my current mental state and navigation abilities. The idea that I might have chosen to extend my walk deliberately, for the enjoyment and exercise, apparently hasn't occurred to him as a possibility. "Not at all, David. I simply wanted to enjoy the beautiful weather and get some additional exercise. The park trail is lovely this time of year." There's a pause that suggests he's processing this information and finding it concerning rather than reassuring. "Mom, Claire mentioned that you two had a conversation today about some safety measures that might give us all peace of mind. Have you had a chance to think about her suggestions?" Safety measures that might give everyone peace of mind. The conversation is moving quickly toward the ultimatum that Claire presented earlier. The choice between accepting electronic monitoring or facing other forms of oversight that could be imposed without my consent. "I've thought about it carefully, David, and I'm not interested in electronic monitoring devices. I value my privacy and independence too much to accept that level of surveillance. It's not surveillance, Mom. It's a safety net that would allow you to continue living independently while giving your family confidence that you have support available if you need it. A safety net that would allow me to continue living independently. The paradox continues to amaze me that surrendering independence is presented as the path to preserving independence, that accepting monitoring is portrayed as maintaining freedom. Our conversation continues for another 20 minutes, with David carefully explaining the benefits of personal emergency response systems, while I maintain my position that such devices are unnecessary and unwelcome. Neither of us is likely to change the other's mind, but the discussion clarifies the stakes involved in our ongoing conflict about my right to self-determination. After we disconnect, I remain in Harold's chair, contemplating the accelerating timeline that seems to be pushing toward some kind of resolution about my living situation and daily independence. The financial arrangements that I've set in motion are succeeding beyond my most optimistic expectations, providing my family with security and opportunities they never imagined possible. But the same people who are benefiting from my anonymous generosity are simultaneously working to restrict my personal freedom based on their assumptions about my declining capabilities. The woman who secretly paid off their mortgage and secured their children's educational futures is considered too confused to be trusted with basic decisions about her own daily activities. Tomorrow will bring new challenges to this delicate balance between providing support and maintaining independence. Emily's scholarship success and the upcoming notifications about Michael's music funding will continue to transform my family's circumstances, while their concerns about my mental clarity and safety awareness continue to escalate. The contrast between these parallel realities is becoming more pronounced with each passing day, building toward some kind of resolution that will either validate my right to self-determination or confirm their authority to make decisions on my behalf. As evening approaches and the autumn light begins to fade, I prepare for bed with the knowledge that time is running short for maintaining the careful balance I've been trying to preserve. Soon I'll need to make choices about how much secrecy I can maintain and how much control I'm willing to surrender. The stakes continue to rise with each successful phase of my financial plan and each escalating expression of family concern about my independence. Tomorrow will bring us closer to the moment when these parallel realities finally converge into a single truth that will change everything. The morning arrives with a crispness that suggests winter is approaching faster than expected. I wake with the peculiar sensation that today will bring resolution to the careful balance I've been maintaining between secret generosity and family surveillance. Something in the quality of light, or perhaps in my own sense of timing, tells me that the moment has arrived to reveal the truth that will transform everyone's understanding of what has been happening in our family. I dress with particular care this morning, choosing the navy blue dress that Harold always said brought out the color of my eyes, along with the pearl necklace he gave me for our 25th wedding anniversary. If I'm going to have a confrontation with my family about competence and independence, I want to look like the dignified woman I've always been rather than the confused elderly person they've convinced themselves I've become. The telephone rings earlier than usual, and Michael's excited voice fills my kitchen with the kind of enthusiasm that confirms the third phase of my plan has begun implementation, exactly as Mr. Garrison promised. "Grandma Debbie, the most amazing thing has happened," he announces without preamble, his 14-year-old voice cracking slightly with excitement. "I got selected for this incredible music program, and they're providing everything I need, including a really expensive guitar and professional lessons with someone who used to tour with famous bands." The Youth Arts Excellence Initiative, another of Mr. Garrison's carefully crafted scholarship programs, designed to appear completely legitimate while providing Michael with opportunities that his parents' current financial situation couldn't support. The program will nurture his musical talents through professional instruction and quality equipment, potentially transforming casual interest into serious artistic development. That sounds wonderful, Michael. How did they select you? For this program? My music teacher submitted recordings of me playing, along with some compositions I've been working on. Apparently, there are anonymous donors who want to support young musicians who show exceptional creativity and dedication. The program coordinator said they only select 12 students from the entire state each year. Anonymous donors who support young musicians. The cover story provides Michael with a sense that he's earned this opportunity through his own talent and effort, which preserves his dignity while providing the financial support that will enhance his artistic development. Have you told your parents about this yet? Dad's in the shower, but Mom is already making plans for converting the spare bedroom into a proper practice space. She keeps saying our family must be living under some kind of lucky star lately, what with the mortgage thing and Emily's scholarship. And now this music program. Living under some kind of lucky star. Claire's attempt to explain the sequence of extraordinary developments that have transformed their family's circumstances over the past month. The coincidence must seem remarkable, though not remarkable enough to suggest family connections rather than unprecedented good fortune. We talk for several more minutes about program details, practice schedules, and the upcoming recital where Michael will perform alongside other scholarship recipients. Throughout our conversation, I'm struck by his genuine excitement about the musical opportunities and his gratitude for support that he believes comes from strangers who recognize his potential. After we disconnect, I settle into Harold's chair, with my coffee, reflecting on the satisfaction that comes from knowing all 3 phases of my financial plan have now been successfully implemented. David and Claire's mortgage has been eliminated. Emily's engineering education is secured through multiple scholarship opportunities, and Michael's artistic development will be supported through professional instruction and quality equipment. My family now enjoys financial security and educational opportunities that seemed impossible just 2 months ago. Yet none of them suspect that the confused elderly woman they're so concerned about orchestrated every aspect of their transformation. The irony continues to amaze me that the same people who doubt my ability to navigate simple neighborhood walks have been the unknowing beneficiaries of sophisticated estate planning and charitable giving arrangements. But today feels different, charged with the energy that comes before significant revelations. Perhaps it's time to stop living this double existence, to reveal the truth about my activities, and challenge their assumptions about age and competence directly, rather than continuing to navigate around their surveillance and restrictions. The decision crystallizes as I watch Mrs. Patterson take her position at the kitchen window, prepared for another day of monitoring my movements and reporting concerning observations to my family. I've grown tired of being watched like a potential flight risk, tired of having my independence questioned by people who have no understanding of what I'm actually capable of achieving. I reach for my telephone and dial David's number, knowing that he'll be arriving at his office and we'll have time for a conversation that might change everything between us. "Hi, Mom," he answers, his voice carrying that familiar note of cautious attention that suggests he's prepared for reports about concerning behavior or requests for assistance with problems I supposedly can't handle myself. "David, I need you and Claire to come over this afternoon. There are some things we need to discuss, and I'd prefer to have this conversation in person rather than over the phone." There's a pause that suggests he's processing the unusual directness of my request, probably wondering what kind of crisis or confession might have prompted such a formal invitation. "Is everything all right, Mom? You sound different today?" Everything is perfectly fine. Better than fine, actually. But I think it's time for some honesty about what's been happening in our family lately, and about your assumptions regarding my mental clarity and decision-making abilities. Another pause, longer this time, as David considers the implications of my words and tone. "Of course we can come over. Would 3 o'clock work for you?" 3 o'clock would be perfect. And David, please ask Claire to bring any documentation she has about personal emergency response systems and monitoring devices. I want to address those concerns directly. "All right, Mom. We'll see you at 3. The hours between morning and afternoon pass slowly, giving me time to prepare for a conversation that will either restore my independence or accelerate their efforts to restrict my autonomy. I organize the documents that I'll need to support. My revelations, including bank statements, legal papers from Mr. Garrison's office, and correspondence related to the charitable arrangements I've established. By 2:30, I'm positioned in my living room with everything arranged on the coffee table, waiting for David and Claire to arrive for what might be the most important family meeting we've ever had. The afternoon light streams through my front windows, illuminating the photographs and mementos that chronicle a lifetime of competent decision-making and successful problem-solving. They arrive promptly at 3, both carrying themselves with the kind of careful composure that suggests they've discussed potential scenarios during their drive to my house. Claire has indeed brought a folder of information about emergency response systems, probably prepared to present a compelling case for why electronic monitoring represents reasonable compromise rather than unacceptable surveillance. Thank you, both for coming, I begin, gesturing for them to sit on the sofa while I remain in Harold's chair, maintaining the kind of formal positioning that suggests this is a serious business meeting rather than casual family conversation. Of course, Mom, David responds, though his expression reveals uncertainty about what kind of discussion I've planned. You said there were things we needed to discuss? Yes, there are. But before we address your concerns about my mental clarity and safety, I want to share some information that might change your perspective on what I'm actually capable of accomplishing. I reach for the first set of documents, bank statements that show the financial transactions related to their mortgage, payoff, and place them on the coffee table where David and Claire can examine the details. David, do you remember asking questions about the anonymous benefactor who paid off your mortgage? Wondering how such an extraordinary thing could happen without explanation? Yes, of course. We've been trying to understand that situation for weeks. The explanation is sitting right here in this room. I paid off your mortgage, David. The anonymous estate settlement was a cover story designed to preserve your dignity while providing financial relief that I knew your family needed. The silence that follows my announcement stretches for nearly a full minute as David and Claire process information that contradicts everything they've believed about the source of their recent good fortune. Their expressions shift from confusion to disbelief to the beginning of understanding that changes everything they thought they knew about my recent activities and mental capabilities. That's impossible, Mom, David finally says, though his voice lacks conviction as he examines the bank statements that document substantial asset transfers and legal arrangements. How could you possibly have managed something like that? The same way I managed our household finances for 40 years of marriage. The same way I helped you and your father navigate financial decisions when you were starting your contracting business. I may be 78 years old, but I haven't suddenly become incompetent overnight. Claire picks up additional documents, her hands trembling slightly as she reads through legal papers that detail trust arrangements and charitable giving structures far more sophisticated than anything she would have expected me to understand, much less design and implement. But the amounts involved, she whispers, studying figures that represent substantial financial resources. We had no idea you had access to this kind of money. Harold and I were careful savers and conservative, investors for more than 4 decades. His life insurance settlement was substantial. Our house has appreciated significantly in value, and my pension and Social Security benefits provided more discretionary income than you realized. I simply chose to use those resources to help my family rather than hoarding them for medical expenses that might never materialize. David continues examining the documentation, his expression evolving from disbelief to amazement as he begins to comprehend the complexity of arrangements that his supposedly confused mother has designed and executed without anyone's assistance or knowledge. The legal structures involved in this, he murmurs, indicating trust documents and charitable giving arrangements. This required sophisticated planning and professional guidance. How did you manage all of this? I've been working with Mr. Garrison at First National Bank for the past 4 months, meeting with him every Tuesday to establish the financial mechanisms that would allow me to provide anonymous support for your family's most pressing needs. Every Tuesday. The phrase hangs in the air as David and Claire realize that my supposedly aimless wandering has actually been purposeful visits to conduct complex business with professional financial advisors. The confused elderly woman they've been monitoring has been executing sophisticated estate planning while they worried about her ability to navigate simple neighborhood walks. Those long walks that had everyone so concerned, Claire says slowly, understanding beginning to dawn. You were going to the bank. Every Tuesday for 4 months, along with additional meetings when Mr. Garrison needed signatures on legal documents or clarification about implementation details. Each time you called to check on my safety, each time Mrs. Patterson reported my extended absence, I was conducting business that required careful attention to legal requirements and tax implications. I reach for another set of documents, papers, related to Emily's scholarship program and Michael's music education funding, placing them on the coffee table alongside the mortgage documentation. And these programs that seem to have discovered our children through some kind of miraculous coincidence? I established those scholarship funds as well, working with Mr. Garrison to create legitimate educational foundations that would provide opportunities without revealing family connections. Emily's engineering scholarship and Michael's music program suddenly make sense as part of a coordinated strategy rather than extraordinary coincidences. David and Claire examine documentation that reveals the true source of their children's educational opportunities, support that will continue throughout their academic careers and beyond. You did all of this, David says, his voice carrying a mixture of awe and embarrassment as he begins to understand how completely he has misjudged my mental capabilities and decision-making abilities. While we were worrying about you getting lost on walks around the neighborhood, you were anonymously transforming our family's financial future. I did all of this because I love you and want the best for your family, and because I recognize that your pride would never allow you to accept direct financial assistance from someone you view as an aging parent who needs care, rather than someone capable of providing support. The room falls silent again as David and Claire absorb the full implications of what I've revealed. The cognitive decline they've been so concerned about doesn't exist. The confused wandering that generated neighborhood surveillance was actually purposeful business travel. The elderly woman they've been treating like a potential emergency is actually the architect of their dramatically improved circumstances. Mom, Claire says quietly, tears beginning to form in her eyes. We've been treating you like you were losing your mind while you were secretly taking care of our entire family. You've been treating me like I was losing my mind because you've accepted cultural assumptions about aging that equate chronological age with diminished competence. The same mental acuity that enabled me to teach elementary school for 45 years, manage a household through good times and difficult periods, and help Harold build a successful contracting business hasn't disappeared simply because I've reached 78 years old. David sets down the documents and looks directly at me, his expression revealing the complex mixture of gratitude, embarrassment, and newfound respect that comes from realizing how profoundly he has underestimated someone he loves. The emergency response systems we wanted you to accept, he says slowly, the GPS monitoring and electronic surveillance, would have made it considerably more difficult for me to conduct confidential business with Mr. Garrison and complete the financial arrangements that have benefited your family so substantially. Electronic monitoring isn't compatible with the kind of discretionary freedom that sophisticated estate planning requires. Claire reaches into her folder and withdraws the brochures and information packets about personal emergency response systems, looking at them now with the understanding that what she had viewed as reasonable safety measures would actually have restricted activities that required privacy and independence. We thought we were protecting you, she whispers. You thought you were protecting me because you had convinced yourselves that I needed protection rather than respect. The difference between those two approaches determines whether elderly family members are treated as autonomous adults or managed like children who can't be trusted with their own decisions. The conversation continues for another hour as David and Claire ask questions about the financial arrangements, the legal structures I've established, and the timeline for continued support that will benefit their family for years to come. Throughout our discussion, I can see their understanding of my capabilities and judgment shifting from concern about decline to amazement at competence they never fully recognized. "What happens now?" David finally asks. "How do we move forward with this new understanding of what you've been doing and what you're capable of managing? Now you stop treating me like someone who needs constant monitoring and start treating me like the competent adult I've always been. You trust me to take walks around my own neighborhood without surveillance. You respect my right to privacy about my activities and destinations. You acknowledge that 78 years of life experience might actually qualify me to make my own decisions about personal safety and daily activities." Claire nods slowly, her expression revealing genuine remorse about the assumptions and restrictions she's been trying to impose. "And the neighbors who have been watching and reporting on your activities? Mrs. Patterson and the others can return to managing their own lives instead of monitoring mine. I'll continue taking walks whenever I choose, for whatever duration I prefer, to whatever destinations seem interesting. If that generates concern about my well-being, perhaps the concern says more about cultural prejudices regarding aging than about my actual capabilities." As evening approaches and David and Claire prepare to leave, our family dynamic has shifted fundamentally from one based on their growing concern about my decline to one based on their newfound appreciation for my continued competence and generosity. The surveillance network that has been monitoring my activities will no longer be necessary or welcome. "Mom," David says as he prepares to leave, "I want you to know how grateful we are for everything you've done for our family, and how sorry I am that we didn't recognize your strength and capability. We let stereotypes about aging cloud our judgment about who you really are. The important thing is that you understand now," I tell him, "and that moving forward, you treat me as the autonomous adult I've always been rather than the declining elderly person you convinced yourselves I was becoming." After they leave, I settle into Harold's chair with a cup of tea, surrounded by the documents that tell the story of months of careful planning and successful implementation. The financial arrangements I've established will continue providing security and opportunities for my family long into the future, while my own independence and dignity have been restored through honest conversation about competence and respect. Tomorrow, Mrs. Patterson will probably position herself at her kitchen window, but she'll no longer be monitoring a confused elderly woman who might get lost on neighborhood walks. Instead, she'll be observing a competent adult who chooses to take daily walks for exercise and enjoyment, someone whose destinations and duration are personal choices rather than symptoms requiring family intervention. The parallel existence I've been living for the past 4 months has finally converged into a single reality where my family understands both my generosity and my competence. The same woman who secretly provided them with financial security is also capable of managing her own daily activities without supervision or electronic monitoring. As I prepare for bed, I reflect on the satisfaction that comes from having successfully challenged assumptions about aging while providing meaningful support for the people I love most. The stereotype that equates advanced age with diminished capability has been decisively refuted by evidence of sophisticated planning and successful execution. Tomorrow I'll take my usual walk, but it will be different knowing that my family finally understands who I really am and what I'm actually capable of achieving. The confused, wandering elderly woman they worried about never existed except in their own imaginations shaped by cultural prejudices about aging. In her place stands Deborah Ward, a 78-year-old woman who has just demonstrated that wisdom, competence, and generosity don't diminish with age, but actually deepen through decades of experience and careful observation of what really matters in life. The morning light will bring new possibilities for a family that now understands the difference between providing care and assuming control, between expressing concern and imposing restrictions, between protecting someone and respecting their right to self-determination. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, You won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.